To get all the options possible, it's a great idea to plug your guitar first into a DI box. And most DI boxes will let you split the signal. You can then come out with your XLR going straight in to your audio interface, and that's your clean signal. You can therefore have a clean signal that hasn't been affected at all, ready to be used for anything you want to use it for. Amp emulations that are software emulations, plugins, whatever. The sky's the limit because it's an unaffected sound. And then you can come right back out of the 1/4 inch out and go into your standard amplifier. That means that you can record your clean signal and record your amplifier, and you've got both of those. And that's a great flexibility to try to keep open if you're going to be doing anything with an electric guitar player. Because if something doesn't work here, you've got a safety net. Now, we're in the Synth Lab, and we have the M-Audio Mobile Pre audio interface. It only has 2 inputs. So that means if we're going to record both these mics, we are out of inputs. We don't have a third input to do a clean DI safety net signal. So we would have to choose between 2 mics on 1 amp versus 1 mic and 1 safety net signal. We wouldn't have to make that choice if we had an 8-channel interface or a 16-channel interface. We could just go ahead and keep using up new channels. But this shows you the limitations of using a 2-channel interface.